Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Yvonne Garcia, and I'm the chair of the Chamber's Women's Network Advisory Board. I'm also the chief of staff to the chairman and CEO of State Street, Ron O'Hanley, and head of global communications. So while everything remains virtual, we at the Women's Network have worked really hard to ensure that we stay committed to delivering our programs every month, and also connecting women across all industries and career levels to strengthen your professional networks and engage you in a greater Boston business community. Hopefully, many of you have been able to participate throughout the year and have gained insight and wisdom from the diverse group of phenomenal women speakers that have joined us. The commitment, this commitment includes elevating women leaders in our community. And in case you missed it, the Women's Network recently announced our 9 Pinnacle Award recipients, whom we'll honor on January 29th. Our team will put a link to the list in the chat so that you can see the 9 phenomenal women who we'll be honoring. So we hope you can join us to celebrate the 2021 Pinnacle honorees. As we wrap up the year and we looked at our data, we're actually really proud to share that 50% of attendees at our gatherings, whether in person in the very beginning of the year or virtual, were first-time participants and new members. So really excited to welcome our new members, and like to take a moment to welcome anyone who's joining us today for the very first time to this great group of women leaders. I encourage you also to join us on today's discussion on social media using hashtag BossBizWomen and the @Boston Chamber. And we also have the chat feature and the Q&A feature on your screen, so feel free to enter your questions for our guest speakers in the Q&A feature on your screen. In case you'd like to share this with others, or if you can't stay for the entire program, we'll record it and post it on our YouTube page as well. So of course, as we close out 2020, I think the discussion in all the boardrooms and virtually, and what's been top of mind for every member of the Boston business community right now is the coronavirus pandemic, as well as issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how lucky are we to be closing out the year with 2 incredible guest speakers who are playing a crucial role in our fight against COVID-19 and who are both passionate about D&I initiatives. So I'm thrilled today to welcome today's speakers, Ramona Sequeira, President of Takeda Pharmaceuticals U.S.A. and President of Takeda's Global Portfolio Commercialization, and Karen Young, our partner in U.S. Health Industries leader at PwC. So in a moderated discussion with Karen, Ramona will share with us her approach to leadership, to Takeda's commitment to D&I initiatives as they strive for a more diverse and inclusive workforce. And also, that's very reflective in the patients that they serve and their efforts to address this pandemic. So with that, I'd like to give a big thank you to our longtime Women's Network sponsor, PwC. We certainly appreciate their support and partnership in bringing this content and platform to all of you today. It's a special one. It's our last one of the year. So if I do not have a chance to speak with you again, I'd like to wish everyone a very safe and healthy holiday season. It's my pleasure now to welcome Pamela Yiannopoulos, a partner at PwC, who will introduce our guest speakers.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. It's a pleasure to be here today. I wanted to thank you all for making time. This is such an incredible conversation that I'm excited for us to hear. On behalf of PwC, it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speakers, Ramona Sequeira and Karen Young. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Ramona. She's the president of Takeda's U.S. business, as Yvonne told us, and she does lead the portfolio commercialization globally. She spent over 25 years in the industry and has built a career that has spanned numerous countries, markets, cultures, and healthcare systems. Ramona is known for her forward-looking approach to leadership, which we are excited to hear about, and for working collaboratively by partnering with her stakeholders to develop business strategies that are based on the needs of patients and the community. Ramona is really passionate about talent development, diversity and inclusion, mentoring, and is committed to the industry's role in shaping a positive environment that rewards pharmaceutical companies, innovation, and ensures patients have access to life-changing medicines. Ramona, we are so thrilled that you are joining us today. Thank you so much. Moderating today's discussion will be Karen Young, our U.S. health industries leader at PwC and one of my fellow partners and mentors. Karen also brings more than 2 decades of experience in professional services across the entire health industry, and she leads a multidisciplinary team of over 6,000 employees at PwC and drives the overall strategic direction for our life sciences and healthcare practices. Karen's goal is to help clients explore new business models, foster value-based customer relationships, and keep up with emerging digital trends while pushing healthcare boundaries to stay ahead of the political challenges facing the health ecosystem. Karen, like Ramona, is very passionate about mentorship and diversity and inclusion in the workforce. In addition, Karen is a board member of the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. Karen, thank you for being here today. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Pam. I really appreciate it. Ramona, I'm so happy to be with you today, even though not in person, but excited to share and get your perspectives on leadership and diversity and inclusion, and obviously all while we're in the middle of a pandemic and hopefully the last mile of that pandemic. So thank you for joining us today.
Nice
Maybe to
be
get
here.
started, what we'd really like to hear is, as the president of Takeda Pharmaceuticcal U.S.A. and the head of Takeda's global portfolio commercialization, you lead with patients and people at the center of everything you do. Maybe share with us some experiences over the course of your career that have fed your passion for people, as well as your willingness to make others better.
Thank you, Karen. Nice to be here today as well. And it always feels like a small miracle when when the technology works and we can see and hear each other. So really pleased. Yeah, I'll tell you, my very first job in this industry was actually in an internship. And I was responsible for developing a distribution system, or actually a monitoring system for a new medicine that had a profound impact on patients with schizophrenia and could, help them integrate back into daily life and out of institutions, and at the same time had a very rare and debilitating adverse event that could be very dangerous, and so it needed to be monitored. And I think that paradox kind of articulates our industry and the world of healthcare that we live in. As an industry, we can have such an amazing positive impact on people's lives, and on the flip side, how we do that matters a lot because there's so many things we need to be careful of around safety and ethics and values and all of that. So I would say for me, coming into this industry, it's been a really important learning that I and my leaders need to really have a strong value system. At Takeda, we call it patient trust reputation business. What's the right thing for the patient, building trust with society, enhancing the reputation of the company, and developing your business in that way. And I think it's, many companies in this space have a strong focus on the patient. I think Takeda is unique in the focus that we put on trust and reputation as well, knowing that over the long term, that is something that we need to continue to build in order to be successful.
That's excellent. Maybe building off of the framework that you discussed as far as the values and the unique framework that Takeda has in approaching, how do you incorporate that into your daily leadership as well as your day-to-day interactions with people?
Yeah, and it's something that we've actually, since the day I joined Takeda, we spent a lot of time talking about, but I will say over the last few years, as we completed a big acquisition and went through a major integration, it really became front and center. And the way I would articulate it is to give you an example. So as an example, we had, as we completed our acquisition, we had a product in a very rare disease therapy area. And so what you get in a situation like this is patients who are very alone. There's not a big, strong patient community around them in many cases because there's so few people with these disorders. And actually providers are very alone too. So one provider might have one patient ever in their practice with this disease. And so, they haven't built a competency around diagnosing and treating these patients either. And so, as we looked at the business historically, when you put a lens on the business, what you want to do is focus on making your product available to more patients and promoting it. But as we stepped back and said, what do our patients and our providers need from us, we realized that they needed much more around education and understanding of who is the right patient for this product and why, and maybe who is not the right patient for this product. And patients needed much more support around understanding, how to interact with their provider, how to interact with a very complex reimbursement system at the same time that they're coming to terms with a very severe diagnosis. It's a really emotional, difficult time for patients. So as an example of putting these values to work, we actually stepped back and we looked at our resourcing around this brand. And we said, well, we actually need to pull back on promotional resources, and we need to add resources in scientific affairs and medical affairs and patient services to better support providers and patients. And so then if you fast forward to look at how, what kind of an impact that had on our business, in the short term, that had a negative impact on our business because we had less new patients starting on the medicine. But in the long term, it had a very positive impact because the patients who were starting were the right patients. And so they stayed on the medicine for, the appropriate length of time. And so what we do as a company is we spend a lot of time just talking about these case studies. As we did our integration, we had leadership workshops, and we just had these normal everyday case studies of how you would handle these situations and had leaders talk it through. Because there's a big amount of trust that we place in our leaders. Everybody makes those kinds of decisions every day and trade-offs every day. And to think that they're doing it with the right value system in place and understanding patient trust, reputation, business is important. And I think what we learned is it's not always easy and it's not always clear or simple. There's not a right answer or a wrong answer. The benefit is in the dialogue, actually, and having these discussions and asking these questions.
And I think that segues really nicely into the diversity and inclusion discussions that so many organizations are having today. And when you think about consumerism and the patient in the center, right, in a pharmaceutical industry where manufacturing and innovation has always been at the forefront, but thinking about each individual's patient journey, help us connect the dots between that value system and then how you think about D&I not only as an employer, but then as the patients that you want to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this year, for all of us, I think it's been a reckoning because we've seen D&I through multiple lenses. We've seen it through the lens of, some of the tragic events that have unfolded around our country related to racism. But then we've also seen it through the lens of healthcare disparities, right, as a result of COVID. And you've seen communities of color, for example, disproportionately impacted by COVID. So we've really had to step back and look across our business. What we've done is we've created something called a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, where we're looking at all the different pieces of our business and how we can have a more, approach that's really reflective of our values towards our community. And so it might be, I'll give you a couple of examples. One example is patient services. So we provide support for patients if they fall, below a certain income level, as an example. So we give free medicines if patients fall below roughly 500% of the federal poverty level. Well, this year, it's become very clear that people lost jobs and were furloughed, and it might have taken time to fall to that income level, but in that time, you don't have cash flow and you still need your medicine. And so we've changed all of our programs to account for furloughed workers with a specific interest on making those available to people in some of these disadvantaged communities. So that's one example. Another example that I like to share is as we look at our supplier base. So we're trying to, all companies want to have a diverse supplier base. And one of the things we noticed as we looked at our supplier base is a lot of these, what we call diverse suppliers, so minority-owned, women-owned businesses are smaller suppliers as well. And so what that means is that they can't always do business with us with the normal payment terms that we have for your McKinseys or other companies. And so this is where equity comes into play, right? So equality would be, say, keep everybody's payment terms the same, and we just get the suppliers who can afford to work with us. Equity is to say there's something systemic in our process that's preventing us from diversifying our supplier base, and it's our payment terms. So we need to be able to adjust those so that we can work with a broad variety of suppliers and broaden our diverse supplier base. So I would say those are just some of the examples, but I will be really honest. we are just starting out on this journey. I think for us, we've been doing a lot. We've a very good foundation, I think, at Takeda. We're very inclusive, we're very culturally sensitive, but I think this year we've all had a reckoning and kind of realized that we need to step it up, and we need to do more, and we also need to make it stick. We can't just be kind of a phase that we go through. And so I'm pretty excited. We've formed a council. We've hired a wonderful gentleman by the name of Javier Barrientos, who leads our diversity, equity, inclusion in the U.S. And it reports to me and my leadership team, this council, so that we are leading by example and involved every step of the way and helping to remove barriers, et cetera, as the team progresses.
That's fantastic. And I think your points are, really well said, scalability and sustainability of these programs. It's not a one and done, program. You have to find a way to make it embedded in the values and the culture of the organization. And you have to be transparent. You have to look at what you have and say, we can do better, and where you want to pivot and do better, set those goals and aspirations for an organization, as well as for people to follow.
Yeah.
Let's pivot maybe a bit back to your career and mentorship and coaching. Would love to get your experience, not only as a female executive. I often find you have the pressure of, paying it forward and wanting to set a good example and be a great leader for others to follow, but you're also oftentimes looked at to be a mentor and a coach for many females coming up through the firm. So would love your perspective on diversity inclusion around mentorship and leadership for yourself.
Yeah, Karen, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, because I'm sure you face many of the same things. And, certainly for both of us being in this industry we're starting to count in decades now. I didn't like the sound of all of that, but, things have changed and gotten better. But I will say that particularly for me starting out, it often felt like I didn't have a lot of really good role models. I had amazing leaders around me, but none of them kind of looked like me or thought like me or acted like me. And so in a sense, I was trying to emulate other people's styles. And in doing that, you realize, oh, that's just not me. That's not the way I lead. That's the way someone else leads, and it's not authentic. And I had to maybe go through that learning curve. But in a sense, I would say it was really beneficial because it forced me to have my own style. It forced me to say, I'm going to have to, lead the way I believe I should lead. I'm going to have to solve problems the way I believe I should solve problems, not the way someone else tells me I should, or not the way I watch someone else do it. And so I think it's been a journey for me, and just learning how to trust myself as a leader, lead with my own style, and then be a mentor and support system to others who are also on that journey and learning those lessons. I would say the best mentors I have when I look back on my career are the ones that were always there to pick me up, dust me off, and help me move forward when I had a setback. And so I really try hard to do that to my team. I have such great employees. I feel like they push themselves really hard. They don't need me to push them. They need me to support them and to be there to kind of help them pick up, dust off, and move forward when they run into setbacks and challenges. And so I think I've been, I think maybe this is just a function of age as you get on in your, in my career and my working life. I just think I'm much more conscious of the impact I have on others as a role model, but also as a support system. As well. I don't know if you have the same experience or different, but be curious.
Yeah, I would say your points are spot on, and I always tell people, look at the good that you see in leaders that you want to emulate, and make sure you also acknowledge the bad and don't repeat it. And so over the course of my career, I would say I've often looked to my mentors and leaders to say those are really good leadership qualities that I want to emulate, and then I've also experienced the bad and the ugly to say, okay, now I know what I don't want to be. And so making sure you kind of take that inventory throughout your leadership journey, and not everyone's perfect, but you have the ability to continue that process as a leader yourself, and then working with others behind you.
Yeah, and I think we also, we've been doing a lot of learning at Takeda around unconscious bias too. And you also learn that we all have these, these biases or observations that may or may not be accurate about other people just by the visible characteristics of those other people. And so, I remember a few years ago in my career learning that sometimes if historically, if you had a male leader who spoke very strongly about something, you might have thought of them as powerful or strong. If you had a female leader that spoke very strongly about something, you might have thought of them as reactive or emotional. And so, it's also understanding how other people are perceiving you and thinking about how you get your perspective across in a way that they can hear.
That's right. Absolutely. No, great points. And so recently you've expanded your role to now include the Global Portfolio Commercialization President, and would love to hear how these roles intersect as well as how they're complementary to each other.
Yeah, this has been really exciting for me because, I almost feel like I have the best of all worlds. So I essentially wear two hats, right? One hat is running our U.S. business, which is a very diverse business across different portfolios, significant revenue and impact to the company. And obviously the U.S. healthcare system is changing and there's so much going on. So it's just interesting and complex and keeps me very, very close to the patient. I mean, when something happens, good or bad, I'm very connected and on the front line of kind of what that response needs to be. And then as we have started to look at our pipeline, we added to my responsibility this idea of global portfolio commercialization. So Takeda, we're really excited about our pipeline. We call it wave 1 and wave 2. Wave 1 are the more near-term assets that are coming, and we have roughly 12 launches in the next 5 years. And that involves a lot of preparation because many of these launches are in areas of very high unmet need, meaning there aren't a lot of products today. The diagnosis rates aren't what they need to be today. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to prepare to commercialize and make these medicines available. So with that hat, what I do is, essentially work with my colleagues around the country that lead the other regions and help synthesize kind of the patient and provider and market inputs into our R&D organization. And so that as we do our development plans, we can make sure we're looking at the standards of care that are most utilized and the data points that matter most to providers and payers and patients. And then also, and this is equally important, taking the R&D expertise and building it into our commercial plan. So understanding the molecules, where do they work best? Where do they not work? How do we position them properly? Getting that scientific expertise to do that as well has been really important. So we're just starting, I would say, on that journey, but it's a really exciting one, and we have, real-time work to do. We should be, in fact, today we just announced that the FDA accepted approval for our first wave 1 product, TAC 721, it's called, for eosinophilic esophagitis, and we're expecting a launch in the first half of next year. So that will be our first launch, and then a number to follow over the coming years as well.
Well, congratulations. That's a great accomplishment. I know there's a lot of hard work that gets to that day. So well done to you and your team.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Karen.
So pivoting to Massachusetts and the greater Boston area, right? Takeda is the largest life sciences employer in Massachusetts, and you've recently announced you're going to expand next generation cell therapy research as well as manufacturing in the state. Would love to hear about your perspective on Massachusetts, the greater Boston area, and the talent pipeline that exists in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have both a professional and a personal perspective on that. So my husband and I just moved to Boston about 3-4 months before the pandemic hit. We moved in January of, is it still 2020? It is, isn't it? We moved in January of this year to Boston. And so on a personal side, although the pandemic hit, we've been meeting our neighbors probably more than we would have if we were all rushing off to work every day. We're all working at home and, taking our dogs for a walk at the same time. So that's been really nice. And on the professional side, we've really consolidated our operations here. So a few years ago, we had already consolidated our research operations here, and that has helped us immensely from the standpoint of both scientific talent, but also partnership. If we want to truly be on the cutting edge of science, we can't put up walls and try to do it all ourselves. We've got to partner and support actually a thriving ecosystem in the Massachusetts area. And since we have made the decision to move our research here, we're participating now in over 200 partnerships. And so I think that's been a real driver of actually this pipeline that we have today and that we're looking forward to with both waves 1 and 2. And then on the commercial side, we've consolidated all of our commercial operations here as well. We still have people around the country, and we still, we have actually like a large footprint in the US across the board. We have plasma collection centers. We have 8 manufacturing sites in the US, but we've got a significant footprint now in the Boston area. And I would say, it's been in some areas easier than others to find talent. I think the scientific talent is here in this area, but we're, obviously competing with many other companies for the same people. The commercial talent, I think, is still building in this area. And so I think that will take a little bit of time, but it's exciting to actually be part of building that. So, we're bringing on board even new graduates and people younger in their careers, and they're getting, hopefully, a great training, for a future commercial career. We've moved people here from other states as well. So we're building on that. I would say that it's a tight talent market on the commercial side, but I really feel that we are trying to find ourselves that kind of sweet spot where we offer something very unique. We're a very employee-centric company. We're innovation-driven. We've got a strong value system. I feel like we're building that reputation and that values proposition, and I've already seen over the year it's getting easier, which is good. That's always a good sign.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and it's a highly competitive market, and obviously location for great talent. So,
yes.
Takeda's certainly taken the lead on recruiting and high-end researchers and scientists. So, good luck with the commercial side.
Thank you. Yeah, we're doing really well so far. So
you mentioned, leading, you guys are a leading company in the plasma space, and pivoting to COVID a bit. You guys have the COVID-19 Plasma Alliance. Would love to hear a little bit more about that alliance. How did it come together, and Takeda's role in the alliance?
Yeah, so we do have we're one of a handful of companies that has a plasma business here in the US and globally. And so when COVID hit, we really looked at what could we do with that plasma business, because there is a hypothesis for a hyperimmune plasma to treat viral infections, and it has been looked at before. So basically, when you think about plasma, there's 2 different ways that it's done. One is direct transfusion. So that's what you hear about more from the hospitals, where I could go into a hospital, donate plasma, and right away that plasma gets given to a patient. The upside of that is it's very fast and immediate. The downside of that is I have to be in the right place at the right time. And if you donate and I donate to the same hospital, your plasma might have slightly different antibody levels than mine does. And so there's a little bit more inherent variation. And so what we are doing is really, I would say, complementing that. That won't go away, that will stay, but complementing that with developing what's called a hyperimmune plasma. So basically, we take plasma collections from patients who have recovered from COVID around the US, and then we pool them and synthesize them into a medicine that's got a very consistent level of antibodies. And we're working with the NIH now to test that in COVID patients who are in the hospital to see if it can help in their recovery, either speed their recovery, improve outcomes. So we're just in the middle of that trial, so I can't, tell you what the results will look like yet. But I would say one of the things when you're collecting plasma is that it's slow, right? It's dependent on people like you and me first getting COVID and then deciding to go into a plasma donation center and donate it, or to a Red Cross and donate blood. So by acting together as multiple companies and really treating this more as a human health crisis versus a business issue, by acting together, we can pool that plasma and we can just collect that much faster. So if each of us were doing this on our own, the timelines would have been double what we're looking at now, because we were able to act together, pool all of our plasma, work with the NIH to do a trial, all of us in it, means that we'll have the opportunity to get results faster, hopefully early in next year. And we're also partnering with a number of companies, hospitals, Microsoft, Uber Health, to encourage people to donate plasma. So the fightisinus.org just encourages awareness of the fact that if people have had COVID and are recovering and have recovered, they can go and donate plasma and help someone who might not be able to recover as quickly.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a few different things. One, as you talk about your increased footprint in the state, as well as the partnership and alliance, 200 partnerships there, and COVID has really driven a ton of collaborations across what we would call the health ecosystem. Everybody kind of brought their walls down, the silos went away, and everyone just came in to help fight for a cure, to help solve for the pandemic, as well as to help support patients. Give me your perspective on how you feel that the industry came together in such a critical time.
You know, I mean, I'm really proud of the industry and you know, not just Takeda, but other companies as well. I think, you know, I mean, I think the vaccines development space seems to have been transformed. I mean, that in the space of a year, you can find a virus, develop a vaccine for it in a platform that's never been used before, scale and manufacture, do the trials in tens of thousands of people, and then get it out. It's staggering to me. I mean, I'm just amazed. And I think it really, you know, this kind of putting the need of the patients first, bringing down the walls, working collaboratively has been a big part of it. I would give a huge shout out to the U.S. regulatory authorities, though. I mean, you know, from everything I hear from the people on our team who are working with, for instance, the FDA, the communication, the real-time communication, the ability to have, you know, dialogue, the focus on speed, but also safety. I mean, it's taken a lot of heavy lifting from many different players and stakeholders to make this happen. And I hope that we will keep the lessons learned from this, that some of the things that we can do faster and that we can collaborate on, that you know, why don't we? I really do hope that we keep the lessons learned from this, because I think it provides a whole new maybe opportunity for science in the future to progress so much faster than it is today. And then you think about, well, if could you apply that to, you know, areas like Alzheimer's, where there's going to be a huge burden on the healthcare system in a number of years. What could you achieve?
That's right. Yeah, oftentimes we've been asked, you know, post-pandemic, how will the new health economy look and what will emerge stronger? And certainly digital telehealth and digital transformation around trials or communications with patients directly, you know, are top of mind of what we hope to see changes. And I think the industry has been pleasantly surprised just by the speed of how they've been able to go after a lot of things. But I think the average American might not appreciate the processes behind science, right? The regulatory interactions that need to happen. It's almost like everything has been an open book through this process. And would love your perspective on, you know, the speed and the agility at which things were able to come to fruition. But at the same time, you hear everyone talking about trust science, trust the vaccine process. Would love your perspective as a leader in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the trade-off is, you know, you want to move quickly, but you don't want to compromise. You know, back to that very first conversation we had when we started this call, you know, you can do very good things and bad things can happen too. And so you don't want to compromise on the quality or the safety of your medicines. And I believe we found a way to navigate that through very frequent communication and bringing down those walls and collaborating and sharing. You know, we even outside of plasma, we have some products in some kind of shared protocols where we're working with other companies with one trial protocol, but different products are going in at different times. So you're standardizing a lot of things that can help you move quickly, but then you're still evaluating each product separately. So I think some of these lessons and in ways of working are really important for us for the future as well. And I know we'll take them with us. You know, at the same time, I think we can't over rely. Like I think if you look at the pandemic, we've probably all as companies found how much we can do remotely. But I think we're also learning the limits of remote work, you know, with the amount of stress that it can cause. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about women dropping out of the workforce. You know, what we're finding even with providers is remote engagements between providers and patients tend to be, from what we hear from the research we do, tend to be good for monitoring patients and supporting patients, but in the diagnostic process, they're not as useful. And you're seeing fewer diagnoses for some of these areas because diagnoses often take a number of conversations and tests and referrals. And that system has not worked, you know, it's been a little clunky over the past few months. So I think it'll be good to see our healthcare system return to, you know, more effectively treating some of these patients that maybe haven't had that opportunity, but keep some of these learnings of how to be more efficient and effective going forward virtually.
Excellent points. And And to round out the COVID discussion, as an employer and as a leader, how have you managed with your workforce and making sure you keep people engaged, and what has Takeda done to make sure from a leadership standpoint they're supporting their employees?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I think in my career, I have never spent as much time on employee well-being as I have in 2020. It was always there, but it was never my number one priority. And this year, for much of the year, it has truly been my number one priority. So, we've done a number of things, and again, I think we've all been learning. We've gotten better at this as our virtual work has progressed. Because at the beginning, for instance, everybody was on these kind of Zoom calls all day long. And over time, we realized the amount of stress that actually Zoom calls can cause. There's certain instances of maybe mirroring and empathy that actually cause more stress on video than they do in real life, and you don't know it nor realize it. So we're doing a lot of things around helping people understand that maybe sometimes you need to turn off your camera. You don't have to have it on all the time when you're on a call. Trying to be flexible around people with, childcare arrangements and kids homeschooling. We've put into place a lot of support for our employees around childcare and learning pods and other things to help our employees who are also parents deal with this. We've had to do a lot around mental and physical health. So making ergonomic office furniture available, making mental health services available, making people realize the importance of it. Reminding people that just because you can't go to Italy on vacation doesn't mean you don't need time off. It doesn't mean you don't need the downtime. And so, we had a fun little staycation challenge this summer where we just had people sharing pictures of, reading on your deck during your summer vacation, but just reminding people that you need to disconnect. It's physically and mentally necessary. And I think particularly as we kind of, 6 months in and we all ran out of that surge capacity that we talk about and had to find ways to regenerate our own energy, it became very, very important to have those conversations. And I'd say those are ongoing. I wouldn't say we've handled it perfectly, but I think we're getting better and better every month. And our employee survey scores show us that as well.
That's great. And I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, we're all seeing a little, glimpse into everybody's life. So everyone's become a little bit more personalized. And, I know we're all expecting snow tomorrow into Thursday, and all our kids are complaining that they might not actually have a snow day because
in fact, you can send them out to shovel the driveway because they're home.
They might actually do it now, right?
Yeah, no, Karen, it's a really good point. We've been talking about this at work. It feels like, I think about my leadership team, we've all gotten to know each other in just a more honest and genuine way. One of my leaders was working in his laundry room for a period of time. I was working in my home, but like my husband was walking behind me to print things out during the day. It just feels a little bit more authentic, and it feels like who we are at home and who we are at work has kind of become the same person. And that piece of it, I really like, actually. I really like that, and I hope we retain and keep that as well.
I do. I joke when I see one of my male colleagues maybe, huddled into a small room and he, is trying to avoid his kids. I said, when my kids were little, I used to take conference calls in a closet just to keep them and now everything's fair game, right? So I think it will change the trajectory of what you worry about others seeing or not seeing anymore. I think we've all been there.
Exactly.
So I think we're going to pivot before we want to make sure we get to some of the great questions that have come in. So I'm in charge of the chat. So, bear with me while I take a quick look at the questions that have come in. We've had several. So maybe I'll start with this first question. Ramona, your career trajectory is so impressive. What advice do you have for young professional women looking to advance in their field?
Well, I have a very soft spot for young professional women because my daughter is one. So she's just graduating from her 4th year of college this year. And she is herself at home right now looking at, jobs and interviews and all of that. And, my advice is this. First of all, I think if this year's taught us anything, it's that, you have to enjoy what you do. this year we've had to put so much effort and energy into everything to make our business run effectively. And kind of what's made it work is that people are excited about their work and like what they do and feel very committed to delivering the solutions that our patients and our providers, et cetera, need from us. So I would say if you find work that you really enjoy, you are bound to be successful and find a way to parlay that into success. Don't think about jobs or titles. I personally don't think that way. It's more about enjoying what you do and having broader experiences and trying new things and learning and growing and building your leadership capability. I think that's one really important thing. I think another is to use your network, take advantage of the people that you know and who might be able to put you in touch with other people, and then find yourselves mentors and people that can be, kind of safe sounding boards for you as you look at things. I told my daughter, don't take the first job that you are offered because it's the first job that you're offered. Really make sure it's something you want to enjoy doing. And you just don't know where your career is going to take you. I mean, I would never have thought my career was going to take me here from, where I started.
Yeah, no, excellent point. And I always tell people, make sure you're doing what you love, not just so you can get a promotion to another level, but make sure it's something you're really passionate about, because, you'll put that into the, background of how you operate day in and day out. And if it's something that you don't enjoy, it's going to show, and you're not going to be as successful as you would as if you were passionate about it.
Yeah, and it takes a big toll on you mentally and physically. And, it's the same thing with the company that you work for. One of the things I love about Takeda is this idea of congruence. Kind of, I feel like who I am, how I lead, how I think is very congruent with Takeda's value system and what Takeda believes and their long-term focus. And so having that congruence actually takes a whole level of stress away that you don't even know is there. And so think about who you're working for. That's probably so important. The company you're working for, the person you're working for, those things can make a big difference, bigger than the actual job description of what you're doing.
Excellent. And maybe I'll pivot to a question that kind of pivots right off of that point is, what are your thoughts on how this year will shape the work culture once you return back to our offices?
Yeah, sometimes I think my head's going to explode if I think about that too hard. So we just did a big survey at Takeda called Explore, and it was basically to get our employees' feedback on kind of what are your thoughts on how you're going to use the office in the future. And so I'll tell you what I kind of learned from looking at that. First of all, I think we're still going to need to rely on person-to-person interaction. Certainly for us, we are not going to be one of those companies that says everything's remote, everything's virtual. I think part of the culture that we've built, we're kind of digging into that well this year and drawing on that. But I think that was built through some level of person-to-person human interaction. I think that's important. I think, though, the work can determine how much you need to do that. So there is work that you don't need person to person. You don't need dialogue or debate or that kind of creative process. And then you don't need to come into an office and sit in an office to do that. Maybe you're just as easy to do that at home. And there's other times where it's really important to have kind of dialogue or debate or creative process or discussion. And it's just better to be live and be able to do that. And so I think we're going to let hopefully the work tell us when we need to be in the office and when we cannot be in the office, and people are just going to be flexible. I'd love to think that, we already have 2 sites in the greater Boston area, so one in Lexington, one in Cambridge, and that's provided us with a great deal of flexibility, honestly, for people who live like way outside the city and people that live inside the city. I'd like to think that we can flex our hours a little bit more. Like maybe you don't need to, Boston traffic's so unique. Coming from Chicago, it took you 2 hours to get downtown no matter what time you left at. Here, it takes you 2 hours in like a certain window and then it's 20 minutes. And so maybe we can flex commuting times so that we can, ease up on traffic and congestion, and people can have a little bit more work-life balance too. So I think we'll really try to be more flexible, but really let the work determine how we need to interact with each other.
I agree. I think the stigma of if you work from home, you're not as productive has definitely been proven wrong.
In fact, that's been one of the challenges, right? People are in a sense more productive. We're working more longer. And I don't know about you, Karen, but I've had to do little things even at home. Like I dress differently for my work day. And then when I'm done my work day, it used to be you get into your car and that was the end of your day. Now I put on my sweatshirt and I walk the dog and that's the end of my day. So you just need ways to delineate, your work and your home life. And I think we've realized how important that is for people this year.
Absolutely. Yep. I don't think we've ever realized how some of those small things like a commute or, waiting for a plane ride, gave us some downtime that we never appreciated. So, but I am looking forward to getting back into the offices and traveling. I think I was meant to be on the road, not necessarily be at home 100%, but so far so good. We have a few questions on COVID coming through. So building on what you're saying about trust, what do you think about the COVID vaccine rollout and how businesses and people can build trust around it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm not, certainly not an expert on vaccines. So I rely very heavily on a colleague of mine, Rajiv, who heads up our vaccine business unit. And he's been educating me, and I would say the rest of our executive team too, on, what we need to know about vaccines and the rollout and all of that. I was watching Governor Baker's priority list, which was rolled out just recently, and I think our first healthcare workers have gotten the vaccine now. I think certainly Massachusetts is doing it in a very smart way, thinking about your highest priority groups and working your way through that. It's not going to happen overnight, and it needs to take time. And I think that's just the nature of vaccination programs and supplies and all of that. So, I also, I would say, have a great deal of trust in the vaccine. I think the FDA made sure to do a thorough review. I give a lot of credit to the companies that, got so many people involved in their trials, so they have good safety and efficacy profiles. And it's not coronavirus isn't an unknown entity. Like, we know the coronavirus family, so I think that knowledge helped as well. I think it's really about supporting this staged rollout more than anything else. And I completely, support, for instance, healthcare workers and vulnerable populations getting vaccinated first and supporting that. We're also having conversations with people in our facilities in some of these states saying, if you're going to move to, essential workers outside of healthcare workers, consider our people that are working in our manufacturing plants, producing medicines every day, that kind of thing. But I think that will come a little bit later, honestly.
Great. No, excellent points. And I think the one area we talked about earlier around transparency, around that trust, I think the industry at large has really been transparent in everything that they've done in this process. And that should give every average American a very comfortable level of they've shown everything that they can, and they've gotten behind the science. And certainly, it's in record time, but not without a lot of checks and balances that we know being an industry that exists.
Exactly, absolutely. And I think showing some examples, like I think in both in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, there were pictures of healthcare workers getting vaccinated. I think, that helps too with public trust, people just being transparent about, yes, I'm getting it, and here's what it looks like, and here's what it feels like, and all of that. I think you're right. Transparency is going to be very, very critical here.
I think I'm down maybe to my last question. So I'm going to ask you what your outlook is on 2021 after this past 9 months of kind of being in a pandemic, and would love to get your perspective on what 2021 looks like.
Yeah, so I think I'm coming back to Charles Dickens and that book, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and I think it ends with the winter of despair, the spring of hope. I think that's a little bit what this whole pandemic year has felt like. It's been so many paradoxes. Such a significant impact on so many communities, and yet these silver linings that we've discovered too, that we've really tried to take hold of. So I think as we go into 2021, I feel very positive about a number of things. One is just what's happening with COVID. I think first of all, we're getting better at managing the virus and understanding it and learning about it. We're getting better at working through these remote arrangements and how to do that well. And then we've got vaccines coming on the horizon. And so I think that when you combine all those layers of things, we're going to have a better, much better approach. And I think that means good things for our society, our economy, our healthcare system as we head into 2021 as well. And it's just going to take time. We're going to have to realize it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to wake up on January 1st and everything's going to be different. It probably will progress through the year. And so I think we just need to have that last vestige of patience to get through 2021 as we start to see things improving. And then on the Takeda side, it's been kind of nice this last month, really. We've had some positive data on our pipeline and some positive regulatory information. And so it feels exciting to start now thinking about that future that's coming with our pipeline assets and getting ready to launch those and bring those to patients in the future. Our business, I would say, when you're in this type of business, we've weathered the pandemic fairly well, simply because, for patients who are very ill or have this rare disease, they want to keep continuing to take their medicine. And in some cases, it's incredibly important. And so we've been very fortunate in the sense that our portfolio has been pretty resilient through COVID, but I think we've kind of felt that lack of being able to connect more closely with patients and providers, and I'm really looking forward to being able to do that more and invest a little more in that as we get into 2021 as well. So I'm looking forward to it. I think we've had so many learnings so many opportunities as well. And I think about DE&I, think about virtual working, think about science and innovation. Some of these things we have accelerated significantly through this time. And while this time has been incredibly difficult, those accelerations stay with us. And so those are kind of the silver linings we need to take and move forward as we move into 2021. I don't know what you think, Karen.
All excellent points. No, I think you summarized it really well. And Ramona, we want to thank you for sharing your leadership journey, your perspectives on D&I, as well as COVID and all the great things that Takeda is doing, not only in Massachusetts, but for patients globally. And we can't wait to see where you go next. I'm going to turn over the program back to Celia to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Ramona. I have to give Karen, a special shout out. We were joking in the prep how hard it is to moderate, especially virtually, and you did a phenomenal job. So thank you, Karen.
My pleasure.
And Ramona, to you as well. We're so lucky to have you in Boston. I'm sorry you had to move during or right before a pandemic, but welcome. We're thrilled to have you and your family here. And while I'm giving shout outs as a staffer, I have to thank the staff. So to Colleen Dowd at Team PwC and to Michelle Consalvo at Takeda, thank you so much for your help behind the scenes putting this together, and Laureen Watts on my team too. So happy holidays, everyone. This was a great way to close out 2020 with the Women's Network, and we hope to see all of you on January 28th and 29th at the Pinnacle Awards. There's a link in the left-hand side of your screen if you want to learn more. So thank you all again. Happy holidays and cheers to 2021.